Hello and welcome to the webinar. Today we're going to be talking about how to quickly build a full stack minimum viable product with AWS Amplify. Let's get into it. I'm Ritik Khatwani and I'm a senior startup solutions architect here at AWS based out of New York. In my past life, I've been a founder and engineer, and I've built various MVPs at startups as well as at enterprises. Now, what is an MVP and why must we build it so quickly? Well, an MVP is the first version of your product or your service that you release out into the market in the hands of your customers to get feedback. You need to prove out your hypothesis, your unique insight as a founder, and make sure you're building something that the customers actually want. An MVP should be built with least effort to prove out what your belief about the market and about your product and your service is. If you take an example of something like Lyft, a ride sharing service, of course, now it offers you a whole bunch of different features, such as ride sharing and then splitting payments and scheduling. But you don't necessarily need to do all that in the beginning. The MVP for Lyft essentially just would be getting from point A to point B and then some minimal features like payments, making sure that a rider is able to be matched with a driver and complete a ride. Similarly, if you think about Airbnb, of course, it lets you filter by a whole bunch of different features today, book a lot of travel and experiences. But in the beginning, the founders just launched an MVP selling mattresses, the ability to sleep on mattresses in their own apartment for a short period. Now, that's how you should think about an MVP. It should be built with the least effort, and it should be able to be iterated upon quickly. Now, why AWS Amplify? Startups have needs to be able to build these MVPs rather quickly, but not be boxed in when they need to scale later on. So you need to build at speed with the right foundation with manageable cost. You need to eliminate boilerplate code, and you need to build features that delight users and get it into their hands quickly and then keep on reiterating. This is where AWS Amplify comes in. AWS Amplify provides easy abstractions for your front end and your back end. It lets you build both of them quickly and marry the two together, and then extend to innovate with the other AWS services as you scale and grow. Now, when you start building out, you want to be focusing on your app, on your features, not on the infrastructure. And AWS Amplify provides you the easiest abstraction, the easiest way to get started with that on AWS. It lets you build an AWS backend using the Studio or the CLI. It lets you build your web applications or mobile applications. You can even include hosting for your web applications or build your app UI with React components using designs from Figma. And you can build cross-platform and mobile applications that connect to your backend with Amplify libraries. Now let's build something. I have an idea. That's how everything starts. My hypothesis says that home decorators and designers depend on a lot of generic tools, and this adds friction to their sales process, to the design communication. And if we use generative AI, we can speed up the design communication, help them come up with variations, and close more business quickly. Now, how can I go about validating this hypothesis? Well, first we need to define the MVP. Like I said, we want to be able to do it with the minimum effort possible. So to validate my hypothesis, I'm just going to build out two key features and prove these two key ideas. That if we allow designers and decorators to generate multiple variations of a design with generative AI, they will be able to close business quickly. So generate designs, track your business opportunities, and make sales. How are we going to build it? Well, we're going to use the following AWS Amplify services and for the following AWS services managed by AWS Amplify. We're going to use Amazon Cognito for allowing our users to log in. We're going to provision a GraphQL backend and an API backed by DynamoDB, as well as a serverless function that will invoke a machine learning endpoint powered by ControlNet and Stability AI to do the generative AI images that we just spoke about the designs. That is going to be fronted with an Amazon API gateway. And all of this will be delivered to the user through a Next.js web application. We are also going to see how we can design this application using Figma and import those components to generate clean React code that we can use in our application today. Let's start building. All right, to get started with our Amplify application, the first thing we need to do is make sure that we have our Amplify CLI installed. And the way to do that is just go and run the following command and install Amplify CLI from npm. Now, to save time during the webinar, I've already gone ahead and done this. When you do that, all you can do is quickly run Amplify version to make sure that it installed correctly. The next thing that you need to do is make sure that the Amplify CLI is authenticated with your AWS account. So for that, all you need to do is run Amplify configure. And once you're done with that, you can run Amplify init to set up your environment and your Amplify application. Now, for the sake of time, I've already gone ahead and done that today, and I've created our application that are very aptly named Housewise. All right, that is going to be our cool new startup that is going to help us generate these designs. Great. Now that we know what we want to build for MVP, your typical flow would look something like breaking it down into tasks and getting into a sprint. You start either with the front end or the back end, and then essentially marry the two together to come up with a good looking MVP that you can roll out to your customers. Now, to get started, I've created an application in AWS Amplify, which you can find in your console by going to the search bar and typing AWS Amplify. And I've created one environment for the backend called Stage. This is going to be where I'm going to do all my development, do all my integrations, and also host my web application. Now to start, I've created a Next.js application with React. So I've also added a hosting environment for my web application. And I've used pre-built UI components made available for React from Amplify. The Amplify UI kit lets you get started with primitives and connected components that let you avoid undifferentiated work to make a good looking MVP. Okay. Here we go. Here's our create next app. That's all it does right now. It has a hello Amplify, and it uses some of the components that are made available from the Amplify UI kit. The UI kit also gives you other connected components. So if you think about a flow such as authentication, which has so many states and so many designs that a designer need not necessarily spend time on, such as login, forgot password, confirm user, you can just use the UI component that are connected to Amazon Cognito in the backend to provide an authentication and authorization experience for your users. I've created a route that's protected and wrapped it up with authentication, with just one line using the with authenticator component made available from Amplify UI. Now, when I go ahead and sign in over here, it's actually integrated with Amazon Cognito on the backend. So when I sign in, it's going to show that I can now access this protected route, whereas earlier I was seeing the login screen and hitting the same URL. Now, do we just get these primitives from Amplify to build our front end? Well, there's a lot more that goes along with it. So if you want to build a good looking front end and you use a design tool like Figma, you can import those designs into your React application and have Amplify generate clean React code for you that you can use throughout your application. So to get started, you can use the Amplify UI kit design that's available in the community on Figma. You can create a copy of this and start creating your own designs. The primitives are all themable and accessible, and the primitives will provide you things like badges, alerts, buttons, dividers, and you can also go ahead and edit the theme using the Amplify UI Builder plugin. The plugin will let you set things like colors, spaces, font sizes, breakpoints for your responsiveness. That's right, responsiveness. So you can quickly build a responsive application right from within Figma. Now here for an example, I've set up a beautiful landing page for our brand new MVP, which talks about all the cool features that our application is going to offer, how much it's going to cost, and where our customers can reach us. I've created two variations of it. One is a desktop view, and one is an iPhone view for mobile users. And if you look at what I've done, I've used the same component in these designs and added a variation that lets me decide how it's rendered using the auto layout features of Figma to generate responsive components and React. So if I go into my components over here and take a look at the features that we just saw, all you have to do is take your component add a variation and set the breakpoint property of which breakpoint you wanted to change at and how you wanted to look for that particular form factor. Now, once you do that, you can go into your Amplify Studio to the UI library and sync your UI library with your Figma design. You can go in here, put in the Figma URL for your designs, and have Amplify import all those components. So when I hit sync, it's going to pull all of that and generate clean React code for me to use in my application. This, for example, the features component that we just looked at, here it is in the UI library. And when I run amplify pull from the command line, I will have these components available to me in my React code. Now let's jump into the React code and make a landing page that looks just the way we saw it in our Figma designs, pixel perfect. So here I have the landing page. I've already included all the components that were generated for me from React with the marketing footer, marketing prices, features, and I've also used some of the primitives like the flex component. The reason I've gone ahead and done that is because I wanted to have a responsive design that flows on a desktop as well as fits nicely on a mobile view. Now, if we go and look at this in our browser, you'll see that Amplify has generated uh, React code that is extendable and responsive for us by default. So let's go and check out our landing page. Here we go. We have a landing page and it looks exactly like our design from Figma. You can see that I didn't have to do much in terms of code except just add those components in. And I'm also able to override some of the properties from the generated code so that if I change the design in Figma and run an amplify pull command to regenerate the components, I don't lose any customizations that I've done. Now, in this scenario, I've gone ahead and changed the color of a particular field in the footer to be white. So if we scroll down to the footer, we see it over here. And that's how you can override the pre-generated components and properties of your designs. Now you can also configure the components in your Amplify Studio. So if I go to configure, you can see that I have the component from my Figma design and I can select each particular subcomponent and set properties for it. In this case, I have this image over here where I've set the URL for this nice little living room that we see. I also have a button where I've set an on-click action to scroll to the pricing page for somebody to get started and sign up for our application. Similarly, if you see the sign up component, uh, we've gone ahead and created actions to I've gone ahead and created actions on these buttons to sign up and redirect the user to our sign up pages. It's as simple as that. You can also have conditional actions if you'd like, and you can set other properties for each and every child component that makes up your React component. Now with that, let's start building our application. Great. We have a landing page. We've drummed up some interest. Maybe some folks have signed up. Let's actually build an application. I'm going to start with the backend now. Now, to prove out the MVP, we said we wanted a very simple way to track the business and generate some designs. So if I go to Amplify Studio, to the data modeling feature, it lets me create a data model, which will generate a GraphQL API using AppSync backed by DynamoDB. Now, all I'm doing is I'm tracking opportunities for a designer to be able to track which customers they might be able to sell to, and then some activities to go along with those opportunities. Now, you can define relationships, you can define fields, you can set up your entire data model over here. You can also use the GraphQL schema if you're more familiar with that, and if you prefer to do it programmatically. Once I've done that, it will give me the ability to go ahead and modify this content as well. So I've gone and added some sample data for a few opportunities based off of the data model that we just created. Now, if I go back into the UI library, I need to be able to show this data model onto the UI and bind the two together. Now, if you see our data model, it has already gone and created a few forms, React forms that we can pull into our application to create these data entities and update it. And I've also created a component in Figma called the opportunity card and tied it to an opportunity data model on the back end. So now not only are we able to create the data model, we're also able to see how it would look in design. So this preview is actually using data from that sample generated data that we just saw in the content. And then I can go into each particular field. I can define the binding to which field the data model should be bound. And I can also create a collection using this. So if I wanted to see more than one opportunity in this example, I could go and create a collection, give it a name, and set it up. For today's demo, I've already created a few collections. So let's say I want to track my opportunities. Some are just at the lead stage. Some are where a designer has sent the proposal, and some have been won. We're essentially building almost like a CRM. So I've created a collection for those opportunity cards called opportunity leads. Now, if I go in and configure, I can set filters to filter out the data that I want to show in this collection. I can also enable search and pagination right here, giving the ability to the user to search for particular records or move to the next page. And I also can sort the records that are displayed. Now let's check it out in our application. Now, if we go here, we have our dashboard, which is now using that collection of opportunity cards that we just created. Now, this looks like an entire CRM, but if you look at the lines of code that it required me to do this, it's quite minimal. So if we go to our dashboard page, I've just included the collection container, given it the leads, given it the component for the different collections that we created. Now, to create this entire UI, it's barely 30, 40 lines of code. And what we have is a good looking MVP to be able to track all our business opportunities already. You can see that this is actually connected to the backend. So if we go ahead and change the data for a particular lead that we have over here, I'm going to change this opportunity value from this to $100,000, because why not? You can see that the data actually updates in real time and it's already linked to our UI. What have you been able to accomplish so far? We've built a good looking front end using the Amplify UI kit. We built a design in Figma and have imported it into our React application with clean React components generated for us with a completely responsive design. And then we've gone ahead and married that to our backend where we created a GraphQL API backed by AppSync and DynamoDB. The other key feature we wanted to include in our MVP was to let our designers come up with design variations using generative AI. Today, we're going to accomplish this with Amazon SageMaker running an endpoint to do inference with stable diffusion using ControlNet. It's a cool way to use image to image generation and have AI generate variations of our designs for us. AWS Amplify provides you a true abstraction of the different AWS services and lets you add custom resources as you scale. Today, we're going to add a CDK stack that provisions an Amazon SageMaker endpoint running the stable diffusion model for us. The AWS CDK, or the Cloud Development Kit, lets you write infrastructure as code in your language of choice. Today, I've created this stack that's provisioning a machine learning endpoint for us using an image that Hugging Face has provided for stable diffusion. It's as simple as running two commands, which is amplify add custom and amplify push. When I do that, it will go ahead and provision an endpoint in Amazon SageMaker, and then we can invoke it from our APIs. Let's take it for a spin. Now here I have a rudimentary page. Like we said, minimum viable product. We just want to prove out our hypothesis. So it's got is a text box to explain a designer's vision. So for example, I'm going to say I want a boho living room with a blue tapestry. I'm not a designer, you can tell by that. And I'm going to go ahead and upload my sketch, which is going to be a simple image of a living room in this scenario. I'm going to ask it to generate a design. And there you have it. We have a generated design based off of the simple vision that we gave to our AI model and this sketch of a living room. So what really happened here? Well, we use the API client library that Amplify provides us and invoke this endpoint that we just created using the custom CDK stack. We gave it our image as a base 64, and we got a response back from the AI model that we rendered onto our screen, all with a few lines of code. All in all, up until now, I don't think we've crossed 200 lines of code to be able to create this entire demo. It includes authentication, a data model, and a good looking UI. There we have it for our MVP. Great, we have an MVP. And here's an architecture refresher of how we built it using AWS Amplify. Let's do a quick recap of the capabilities. We built an app frontend using UI React component library from Amplify with themability and accessibility built in. We also built front-end designs using Figma and imported it into our application as React components using the Figma integration. We also can build forms based off of the data model, and not just based off of the data model that you've defined in your APIs, but any JSON structure. Amplify can create React components for you, generating a form that's easy to use and integrate into your application. We also built a backend. We did it through the studio, created our data model, configured authentication, as well as managed and generated some sample data for our application. Amplify also provides you libraries to help build feature-rich apps beyond what we just saw today. You can create all of these use cases using Amplify libraries, including things such as storage, analytics, predictions with AI ML, notifications, and geo-aware applications using Amazon Location Services. You can also host your application with Amplify Hosting. It's as simple as connecting your repository, configuring certain build settings, and deploying your application. This provides you a lot of benefits, such as a CI/CD workflow, not only for your static applications, but also for your server-side rendered applications like those built with Next.js. You can have features like pull request previews and custom domains. You can have automated tests run as part of your CI/CD pipeline, and it supports most of the common single-page application frameworks, including React, Angular, Vue, Svelte, Ionic, Ember, and other JavaScript SPA frameworks. It also supports password protection. So let's say you're in that pre-MVP phase where you want to have it shared with let's say a coworker or co-founder. You want to get feedback from a close friend, but don't want it to be released yet. You can lock down your website with a username and password, so it's not publicly accessible just yet. But is our backend production ready? And can we take this to market? Well, we saw that the front-end developer experience over here was quite easy. It generated code that a senior developer might write. And the backend is also quite extensible, as we saw by adding a custom endpoint that uses AI and ML. So we'd like to think that Amplify gives you both worlds, and it's actually production ready and extensible to be able to take to market. You can also extend what Amplify creates for you using Amplify Override, which is a way to customize the settings that Amplify sets up for you by default. You can add custom resources like we did for our AI model, and you can export your entire application as a CDK stack to be able to be plugged into a CI/CD pipeline as you grow and add more people to your team and have a separate DevOps group maybe. So to get started, go to aws.amazon.com/amplify/getting started today and build your MVP.